Hi, I'm Bandy, CMO at Alchemer. Thanks for joining me today on Behind the Strategy, CX Leadership in Action. I've got great guests for you today. I've got Andrew Pierce, CEO and founder of Company Sage, and his COO, Jeff Cummings.
Pleasure to be
Guys,
here.
let's get into it.
Let's go. Looking forward to it. We've got some great topics.
So maybe let's start today's conversation with Andrew. I know a little bit about Company Sage, but tell us about Company Sage, and with that, kind of why customer experience is kind of foundational to what you're doing, what you've built.
Yeah, so Company Sage is a platform because we're a SaaS company and everyone's a platform. So we're a platform where we help clients form and maintain their companies. And then beyond that, we've got the ecosystem of setting up your bank account, your bill pay, maybe even offering an NPS service sometime down the road. Would we in-house NPS ever?
I don't know.
Compete against them? You guys do it so well. But anyway, so we're a platform for forming and maintaining companies and then kind of assisting with the enablement. And then the customer experience, I mean, honestly, it was just kind of born. We were a small company and I didn't want to be mean to the clients on the phone, so you kind of over-deliver. And then beyond that, you kind of find the big guys treat them like a number, so it's counter-positioning, so it's kind of counterintuitive. Don't treat them like a number, and then treat them nicely, and then it works. You're like, well, we should probably keep doing that. And then next thing you know, the other people aren't doing it, but you're doing it, it's working, and why stop it if it's working? And that's how we decided on customer experience.
I love customer experience as a differentiator, and I love that you started with be nice on the phone, but I have to imagine it was a little more than that.
What was the differentiator? I mean, you go out and you look at the brands that you enjoy shopping, purveying, whatever it is, perusing, whatever people get up to these days. There's the ones who make you kind of feel special, knock it out of the park, and then the ones where it's just entirely transactional. So.
Okay, so you build this business with CX sort of in the back of your mind.
Forefront even.
Love that. And then you bring in Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
And
he has the CX tattoo.
Oh, maybe we'll see that later.
Roll up the sleeves, Jeff.
So, Jeff, you have built this playbook around CX. Tell us, I don't know, your philosophy. Tell us what you've done and how you're approaching it.
Well, yeah, like Andrew said, customer experience is actually one of our strategic lenses. So as we look to make any kind of strategic decision, we always look through kind of the three strategic lenses that we have. One of them is scalability, one of them is compliance plus, and the other one is customer experience. And so that helps us to guide our strategic decisions. But with regards to the playbook, it's actually, I think it's, even though I once worked for a company that said best practice is not common practice. Mm-hmm. And, what I found in my experiences is that if you really create a fantastic customer experience, if you listen to them, if you take their feedback, if you let them know you got their feedback, and then you incorporate their feedback, they tend to look more favorably on your products and services and your brand as a whole. And in our space in particular, it can be very commoditized, and so it can make customers feel really commoditized.
It's terrible what they're doing.
And if you're forming a business, it's like making a dream come true. And you don't want to feel like you're a commodity when you've got a dream. So that kind of informs just our overall philosophy around customer experience.
Competitors are just bloodsuckers extracting all the value out of small business America. It's disgusting and they should be ashamed.
In all seriousness though, I mean, I think you're right. When you're starting a business, it is very much like having a kid, right? It is something that is so, I think, special for people. They put their blood, sweat, and tears into it. And so to have a partner like Company Sage that'll come in and be respectful of that, right? And recognize
it's
it.
Like a warm blanket during a blizzard.
There you go. Who doesn't want that? So you've put this foundation in place, this customer first culture. Andrew, is there a time that comes to mind for you when you were like, okay, this investment we're making in customer experience is worth it, right? Something, I don't know, unexpected, or just really put a spotlight on the fact that by making this choice of putting CX top of mind, there was a great result for you.
I think one of the fun things, especially having been at it so long, is just seeing the original clients and the success that they've had. Because, we've grown up and it's fun being like, oh, we were like this big and then we're this big, and that's cool. And then seeing the same thing for the clients as well, knowing that you played a part in it. I mean, you've got 80,000 clients. It's just a lot of fun to look out and realize you're making a difference.
Yeah. I love that you're kind of growing together and like
It's beautiful.
building lasting relationships, if you will. So Jeff, let's talk a little more in the weeds, I guess, if you will, about your NPS and feedback strategy. So you had shared before, you've been running an NPS program since 2005.
Yeah, I think 2005.
Before they
maybe
called
a
it
little bit.
NPS.
Maybe a little bit before
Yeah.
that.
So
Dating myself here.
So I know you shared previously kind of what that program looks like, but maybe let's recap. What does your NPS program look like today, and maybe what makes yours different than other people?
Yeah, so the first thing is that, the standard playbook of at least, twice a year doing NPS, that's certainly the playbook when it comes to SaaS companies anyway. Asking the ultimate question, the reason for their score. But over the years, as I developed the survey, it always still kind of felt to me like you get a recency bias built into that. And so I started this playbook where I first and foremost, I always just start off by asking the ultimate question, reason for your score. And then go in and start asking some of the questions about the products and services, which some people might call it an annual survey or whatever. Keep it really, really brief, but ask the same questions over and over and over again and try to get some additional insights. And the reason why I kind of developed that as a playbook was they give that first answer, they get their insights, but I actually really want them to think about their entire experience, maybe not just what happened most recently. And then the feedback loop then becomes really important, in which once we gather all the feedback, we've done the analytics, I like to then have anybody who was a detractor or had negative commentary to follow back up with them, do a personal reach out to those customers and get a chance to talk to them, get additional feedback. Maybe it's something that we were doing, they didn't know we offer, or maybe it's something we should offer and we just didn't really have that full insight to it. And then we take the insights and send an email and we say, here are the things that we're doing in our roadmap based on the feedback that customers like you had to say. And I find that even it typically drives up NPS participation, because when customers go like, oh, you listened and you're doing things about it, you're actually telling me what you're going to do as a result of the feedback. And then for the customers that didn't fill out the survey, then it starts getting a little bit of a FOMO, like,
Sure.
well, I didn't make my voice heard. And so, but they're doing things, so I want to get my voice heard. And sometimes they suggest things that we don't do, but at least if they see that people are making suggestions or they're giving us feedback, we're doing something about it, I think that helps to kind of really close that loop. And sometimes I'll do it with a combination of, and here's what we've done so far and here's what we're doing. And then when I send out that next NPS survey, I'll say, since the last time you fill out the survey, here are the things that we've done based on all the feedback. So that kind of gives them one more reminder of, it's not just a smiley face in an email or whatever, but it's just more of a cohesive message that says that there's a real feedback loop happening.
I love that. You're collecting all the feedback, connecting it back, to the business to take action on it, and then actually telling the customers that you took action to really close that loop with them. And to your point, incentivize them to come back and do it again, right? If you didn't share your opinion, you should start, because we're listening, right?
That's right.
I think that's really a key that a lot of organizations miss, is that final closing the loop and showing that you're taking action. Andrew, we were joking a little bit earlier about things that have come through your NPS survey and the feedback that you've gotten. Share a time where maybe the feedback coming through maybe challenged an assumption that you had.
Should we start with annual subscriptions? That's probably a good place to
You ought to
start.
start with annual subscriptions.
Yeah.
So we switched over to a monthly billing model, thinking that clients would prefer to be charged just a little bit every month. It better, at least in theory, matches the corporate life cycle. Your company starts,
Sure.
It could start and stop at any time. It doesn't really fall in this calendar year. So we roll it out. Turns out the clients don't like it. and then, you get anecdotal information, and then you send out the NPS, and I don't think we quite got death threats, but it was pretty resounding to pretty please bring back the annuals as well, or at least give them the option. But we thought we're doing the right thing by the client. Don't take the annual
Sure.
upfronts for
Giving
that.
them flexibility.
So
yeah,
you
yeah.
think, the market didn't agree. We got punished, and we only found out because of this great tool Alchemer that we started.
Yeah, it was actually the Alchemer survey that
it was.
what actually drove this feedback for us to be like, oh wow, this was not, it was literally, and I think when you and I talk separately, every time you run a survey, you think you know exactly what they're gonna say, and every single time I've run it, there's always something that's a surprise in there, which is just, to me, testament of why you do it in the first
Yes.
place, is
Yes.
because you just naturally go in oh, I know my business, I know what they like, I know what they don't like, I know where we can get better, you think you know it, but then when you get the feedback, that's when you really,
I
that's
think
when
these
you
are all
really
things
learn.
that I've said too. Yeah, maybe you stop talking to clients so much, or someone tells you the plural of anecdote isn't data, but you insist, you're like, I just got off the phone with this guy,
Right.
and meanwhile,
So one of the things that I think is interesting is when maybe what you think is going to be there is a reflection of like, hey, we're seeing a lot of support cases on this topic. So of course it's going to show up in the NPS survey next quarter or whatever. And then it doesn't. And you're like, or sales is saying, hey, customers want this thing, they want this thing. And then it doesn't show up in the NPS. Any other examples where you've been surprised?
I mean, we adjusted our pricing on mail, for example, and that was pretty brutal, the feedback. It's interesting where you can and can't adjust prices, and clients do or don't notice, and every once in a while you're like, I wonder if they're going to notice the new mail pricing, and boy, did they notice the new mail pricing.
Now, did you hear about it ahead of time, like in support calls or just in the survey?
Only anecdotally, and even barely even then,
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you get some angry clients, but at volume, it's kind of hard to tell, like, is this an issue? Right, and then you think it is and doesn't show up in the survey.
Yeah.
And it was the single largest driver of negative sentiment. I think it was it negative 97 or negative 100?
I don't know if
I think like one
numbers
person
here,
misclicked and liked
And
the new mail
Yeah,
program.
yeah,
Yeah. I think it was a misclick.
The voice was
Bad.
overwhelmingly, we definitely.
The software
voice,
was red.
and
Everything was red.
we've already
Rolled it back.
We've already
Mea culpa.
rolled it back. We're
Yeah.
already doing it, like we're like, okay, we're making these changes really, really quickly because we want to really be responsive to their voice. But another company I ran, NPS, everybody was so focused on hold times. Like everybody was so worried about hold times. It's all about hold times. And it turned out that customers really didn't mind so much the long hold times as long as they got their questions answered. So we started taking huge chunks of people off of the phone to go through this like real deep training. We communicated up front with the customers. We're like, we've heard you said you want us, so we're gonna be carving out time to do a lot of deep training to make sure that we can increase that first contact resolution. We communicated it ahead of time. Hold times went up really, really high because we would have like a third of our staff off the phones for a while. And over time, as we finally made it through the cycle of all of support reps, this is a pretty large organization, about 250 people. By the time we ran through, got everybody trained up, like NPS skyrocketed like 28 points in the next wave. And everybody talked about how much different it had been.
Yeah.
Now, I still don't think that we ever got to what I would consider to be like a gold standard of hold times, but it just proved that the thing that we were so focused on ended up being the thing that didn't matter as much to them.
Right. First call, single call resolution, way more important than more time on hold.
Nobody
Love
ever
that.
remembers that they were on hold, but everybody remembers that they have to
Yes.
call back
Oh,
over and
yes,
over and
yes,
over and over
yes,
again,
yes,
right? But
yes.
these are the kind of insights that sometimes, if you don't tease them out, you won't ever really get them because you just kind of go through the same thing over and over.
So I want to come back to the structure of your program. So you're doing it, consistently. So on a regular cadence or frequency, you're using consistency again in that it sounds like same survey every time. So you've got a clean baseline and benchmark so you can see how things move. You mentioned asking additional questions about products and services. And you shared with me, you have a little bit different of a scale for those. Will you talk about that?
Yeah, I guess it's just basically a modified Likert, but the reason why I went to just 1 to 4 is because so often when people are taking surveys, they will choose the middle answer. They're going like, oh, I'm taking a survey. I don't know. I'm just going to choose 333, and then you don't really get any insight from that. I want them to have an emotional, a real thinking moment
Yes.
to give me a real answer,
Yeah.
because it's not down the middle. Everybody mostly has a positive or a negative sentiment about something, and then that helps me to use that score plus those numbers, plus then when I look at the sentiment, I can use that to determine what are the actual drivers of NPS. Because even we were talking with your SVP of product earlier, and him and I agreed. It's like, yeah, sometimes they'll give you a really high NPS score, but they still have some things that bother them. But then some things we do, like mail, we might thought, oh, we really need to fix the UI on the product, and then it turns out this one thing that we did ended up creating like a lot of frustration, and so it's finding out what are the things that actually truly impact sentiment and scoring, and just digging in. And I think the 1 to 4 is just something it's a lot easier to use that than it is a 3.
Yeah, yes, because I think, to your point, people do tip one way or the other, but it's also just really easy to not think about it.
That's right.
So I love that you're pushing them so that right? Like, oh, on these 3 things, people are not so happy, right? Versus over here, like they really love this, and helping you kind of prioritize what you're going to do. We talked about, kind of how you're pushing your survey responses back into the organization so that people can follow up on them. Talk a little bit more about that. So you run the survey, then what happens?
So we run the survey as soon as the results start coming in, because we have an integration into Salesforce. We create cases off of anything that has a negative sentiment or is a detractor.
Okay.
And so that creates cases in Salesforce for our customer service team to turn around and start following back up with those customers. And then we fill out we have a certain case type, we fill out a small form. So we can say when we were done talking to them, what did we cover? Did we feel like they were happier after we talked? Were they neutral? Were they still dissatisfied? So we get some additional kind of context from that, and then we feed that information back into the organization. And that's kind of like where we get that extra level of touch. And since we have so many clients, we really, the one thing I've definitely learned is I can't run out all NPS twice a year. I have to really kind of do it in 1/6 of our customers every month, so that we get a frequent pulse, but on top of that, it gives us the bandwidth to actually call them. If you run it out to 80,000 customers and you get 3,000 calls, you need to make you're never going to fall back with them in a timely way. So
so true. Your support team doesn't need that volume of
all
cases
coming in
to
at once.
chase,
They would not
couple
like
times a year,
NPS at all, then for sure.
So definitely a best practice, right, of bringing this back into the business so it gets acted on, and again, closing the loop. So you're running this survey, you're following up with the customer, but you're also getting insights, right, on what products and services people like, just generally their NPS kind of rating. What do you do with that?
So our we pretty much share a lot of this data all the way throughout the whole entire organization. So NPS isn't just something that one team runs and then nobody else hears about it. The first thing, we let them know that NPS is coming out. We kind of walk them through the playbook. Once we start getting in the calls, we've already kind of set aside time for us to make those follow-up phone calls. And then we discuss in the operations team weekly the feedback that we're getting back and the additional insights that we're getting from those meetings. And then we're starting to kind of put all this together, which is one of the reasons why we're here today, is to be able to start going through the Pulse platform so we can start sharing with, like, obviously our CEO, this is the results back that we're getting. But even then, we still, after NPS, we share all of the results out with the entire company. So there's like this big transparency that's happening. And the good thing about sharing it with the executive team, like for instance, we started getting back these results in aggregate so fast that then we were able to put together our roadmap and say, okay, we need, because customer experience is a strategic lens for us, we really need to stop and say, okay, let's reprioritize. What can we take off of the roadmap that isn't going to have the same kind of impact as putting this on? And then that gives us the ability of an executive team to kind of stack hands. Because if you just say, well, here's more work, then everybody's going to be like, okay, well, what, we actually do a prioritization and say, what are we taking off our plate to make sure that these things get done and that we prioritize them.
So Andrew, talk about that a little bit more from the CEO perspective. Like, what are you looking for in the CX kind of reports that Jeff's bringing you? Like, what matters to you?
I mean, is this a brand that we would want to use? And the nice part is we do drink our own Kool-Aid, so we've got a variety of entities that we put into the software. And you look up and go, and then we use it, we do the product offsites. You kind of do the, what is it, where you put all the words up on the thing, the web thing, the bubbles.
The mind map?
The mind map.
Oh,
Yeah, so we'll have the NPS, because you might have really strong feelings on something, but it's just not possible. I mean, it's nice to know that's what the clients want, but you just can't do it, and you've got other stuff. And that's how you make sure the voice of the customer comes through on it.
How important is it to you that your NPS results make its way back out to the rest of the organization?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's our raison d'etre.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the absolute transparency, and that's how we run the company. It's pretty free-flowing information. So especially when you've got the frontline agents dealing with the clients, you don't want to cordon them off from information. Give them all the information and trust them to make the right choices.
I love how one thing Andrew does so is by sharing the results in with the all hands and then us talking about like what are some of the changes that we're making to the roadmap. I also believe that those who are well served serve well. So like when our team feels like the things that we're doing are actually reducing their pain and and customer pain, it doesn't feel so disconnected from like reality, right? So when we share with them, here are the things that the customers had to say, here are the areas that we need to make changes. Yeah, sometimes people are a little bruised inside those meetings, there's some egos that are bruised but I love the fact that our culture, our team, like sometimes like one of our team members, we were talking about this piece of feedback that we got and she was like, wow, that really bugged me and my team to hear that in front of everybody at the all hands meeting. But like we are committing that this is never going to get brought up again. It's not a public shaming as much as it is like us being fully transparent. We're going to make the efforts. We're going to make things better. And she was like, we're never talking about this negatively in the all hands ever again. And I just love that, that she like felt like it was an area that she took personal responsibility of. I think if that's intertwined in your entire culture, it just changes the way that everybody looks at it.
I love that you have an internal feedback loop, right? Like we talk about closing the feedback loop with our customers, but you're doing it internally too. And like
we run
so
an ENPS as well. We run an ENPS as well. Fully anonymous for the record, yes.
Yeah, it is anonymous.
We do keep their IP address.
So much to the point that, if you don't speak your mind, we don't really want you on the team at the end of the day. So just really promoting that transparency top to bottom.
Yeah.
So you hire them for their mind, so if they're withholding, they're withholding.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, we have a lot of customers that use us to run their employee engagement programs, but I just love you're taking your customer feedback and pushing it through internally too, right? That you're not trying to hide it, you're not sharing the negative, the positive, you're sharing the whole picture. Because I think it sounds like it's driving choices that you're making as a business. And so your employees now understand, well, our customers are asking for these things. We're building these things. Like there's a whole loop and they're a part of that. I think that's awesome. I think a lot of times NPS and customer feedback gets siloed among the teams that collect it. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that you're pushing it back out to the org is fantastic. So again, you're consulting with all these businesses and you've learned all these things about the importance of CX. And I'm really impressed with how, again, you've ingrained it in your culture. It's a strategic lens for you, but you didn't know everything. You didn't know all this when you started, and you brought in Jeff to help. So what have you opened his eyes to in the world of CX?
Well, I think starting with company culture, I think one of our very first meetings is I said, if we're not a culture first company, then we can't win, because there's no way you can make those who are served well, or those who are well served serve well. So that was probably the first thing. As I said, we have to be a culture first company. If we're going to be a customer experience company, we have to be a culture first company. And then I think we had a really fantastic team answering the calls from prospects that had a lot of training pre-sales, but then post-sales, we didn't really pay a lot of attention to that. And we did a lot via email, and we kind of slipped into kind of somewhat of a transactional mindset post-sale. Even though we were doing everything at like world-class speeds and stuff like that, things still happen, you know, and when somebody has a question or they have a concern or whatever, they still need to get a hold of us. And so I convinced him to let me roll out a new phone system with queue callback features so people don't have to sit there and wait and listen to hold music. He really gave me a lot of freedom to replace enough rope, yeah. And he allowed me to replace the CRM. He let me go out and get Alchemer. And so even in this particular instance, him kind of serving me to be able to serve our customers and serve the business and giving me that freedom, that makes me want to kind of come in every day and keep doing it. And then that obviously that then translates to the way the team feels every day as well. So a lot of it just kind of came in with a, God, you love the customers, you got these great people to answer phones, but we need this afterwards as well. I just don't think he quite realized how explosively we were growing, and that some of the things that we were doing before we just couldn't keep doing and scale the way that we need to scale. So
but I love this about your story, that you guys have made customer experience so key to who you are as an organization, that as you're exploding and growth and you have all these great things happening, you didn't lose sight of that, right? That like, I mean, I think Andrew, it says a lot about the people you've hired, right? That like could come in and make sure that like you carried that on and that you kept your customers first. And I think it speaks a lot to the business you're building. We've talked about a ton of things, but let's talk maybe about the future. So Jeff, what are you really excited about with your CX program going, you know, into, let's say 2026 or whenever, right? Like, what are you wanting to do next? How are you going to mature the program?
Well, that's a great question. One of my mentors once said, if you provide the same level of service next year that you did this year, there will be a perceived drop. So I think that we can't rest. I don't think that customer experience is a destination, no matter how good your surveys are. You know, there's always things that you can do to be better. I think probably one of the things, not to just to pitch Alchemer here, but getting the insights that we're getting and finally having a tool that integrates in with our CRM makes us so much more data driven and so much more dynamic. Like now, like, you know, a Slack alert can come to a supervisor as soon as there's a bad survey. That's like super key, right? You can get on the phone, you can take care of it right away. You can say like, people are like, oh, you're actually reading this stuff. And so I think it's just finding deeper ways to integrate their voice back into our business. But Andrew's got some other really great ideas, like when we were meeting with the team here today, talking about like how much we'd love to be able to integrate like full story, so we can watch people when they're rage clicking. Is there an opportunity there for us to do an intercept and get a little bit more information? Or can we find out a little bit more insight about what products and services are actually most important to them, instead of what we've crafted, of what we think is important to them, letting them tell us what's important to them. And sometimes it's just stuff like 2 years ago, we ran NPS the first time, nobody mentioned mobile. And this time it was all in our surveys and no one had really ever even mentioned that before. So it's these little pieces that we tease out that maybe we backburnered it or didn't seem that important, and just making sure we keep incorporating that voice into the things that we do, because I do think, especially in our industry, that's going to be a real big differentiator for us, because they just treat people like numbers, and we don't want to lose that connectivity. I think that's actually always been part of Andrew's vision. He's always said, there's people here, there's people behind the company, you know, this This isn't robots, you
Yeah.
know? And so we want them to know they can reach out to us. We want it to be part of a conversation. And if you lose, you go like, oh, well, now we've got 80,000 customers. We can't talk to anybody. If you just stop listening, well, then good luck with your company in the future is what I would say. You're probably not going to do too well.
Again, I love you're keeping your customers front of mind and finding new ways to hear from them, right? Like they want mobile, you're hearing that. Sounds like maybe you're gonna go down the path with that, right? You're finding new ways to capture their feedback when they are in maybe a moment of frustration, right? And understanding what's happening there. I love that you continue to evolve so it stays a differentiator for you. Andrew, what would you add? What are you maybe hoping to see, in the future from the way you treat your customers, interact with your customers, the things you capture, the feedback from them?
I think the mobile is really interesting though, because it's one of the things where you would have assumed we're kind of in this mobile first world. Like 5 or 10 years ago, we would have directed a lot of investment into it and the clients didn't want it.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we're going, oh, now they finally want it, and it would take us down a completely different path. Whereas I know some of the competitors probably going, wow, they're stuck in the Stone Age, yeah, but the clients literally don't want it. Like, congratulations, you built it, and just having those insights again and again, and avoiding a lot of those missteps and just staying on the tried and true path until we're delivered.
Well, listening to your customers is what it sounds like you're doing,
You don't have
right?
to tell me.
Like,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm telling everyone that's watching because not every company is company sage and listening to their customers and like.
Well, it's easy to pay lip service to it, right? I mean, you don't want to go out there and say we're not customer centric at the end of the day. That goes over like a lead balloon for marketing.
Yeah, it is not the marketing message that we're leading with.
Right.
That's true. But I think, we kind of talked about this at the beginning, there is a very clear feeling when you engage with a company that is not truly customer first, right? They don't have to say, we're not customer first. You can feel it. And conversely, right, you can feel it when you engage with a company that is authentically customer obsessed, right? It's a better interaction from the outside. So, you don't have to tell people.
It is still difficult though.
Us.
Yeah, they're putting up with us, that's
Well,
for sure.
It's like a relationship. It's like, a marriage, you've got to work on renewing it every day. And it's a lot easier when you're small and to scale up with it rather than some of the bigger companies. It's like turning around a battleship.
Yeah,
so it's just not going to happen, right?
For sure.
And no one likes to, how many people sit down and go like, I'd love to get some feedback from you. Nobody ever really says that. So in some ways getting, kind of the NPS and really doing voice of the customer stuff means you have to be open to hearing things that are, even today when we were looking at the results, were a little cringy for me. And I was like, but you have to kind of go through that, but a lot of companies, they send out the surveys, but are they really wanting to face the truth, the hard truth?
Well, I think some of them game it too. They put the NPS survey out in a way that you can't answer it poorly, because he was going over some of the things he could do to doctor the numbers if he wanted to. The way it asks things, he's like, everything's great, nothing to look at over here.
Well,
sweep it under the rug.
You could do that, right? But it's not going to benefit the business.
Correct.
Right? So, if you're every quarter, whatever, saying, look, we're 97 on our NPS score, but really, you peel it back and we might not be up there.
Well, it's going to drive you financially. You're going to eventually see it anyway,
well,
right?
That's right. It's going to show up in other places. So, kudos for just doing the right thing and, sharing the whole story.
Well, it's also because we want to get rich. So just to be clear, it's not purely like we're not just doing good for mankind here as well,
Love it. Andrew, Jeff, thank you for the time today. At one point, Jeff, you said best practice is not common practice. And I love that. And you have shared so many best practices with all of us today on, I think, running a great NPS program and capturing feedback, closing the loop. And then I think, Andrew, you've shared some best practices, I think, on just how to run a great business, how to make sure you're keeping your customers top of mind and building that into the culture. So thank you. Join us next time on Behind the Strategy, CX Leadership in Action.